My name is Susan Foley, co-founder and executive director of HESSA. It's a nonprofit that was formed to create awareness and research and support for people with Hashimoto's encephalitis, which is a form of autoimmune encephalitis. I'm excited to be interviewing Nick Nelson. She is the other co-founder of HESA. Her and I have been through this journey together for 10 years. She was diagnosed the same time I was, actually, and found each other rather difficultly because there was nobody else diagnosed that we could find. And my reason for being so excited to interview her. Nick has served as executive director for many years before I became one. And she was on the board of directors for quite a few years after that. So onward with the interview. Hi, Nick. I'm so excited to sit down with you today to discuss your journey with this form of autoimmune encephalitis. You and I have such a history together, forming HESA and writing the books. We have been together through this thick and thin.
Indeed, we have.
Yeah, we sure have. I'll start with asking you, how old were you when you were first diagnosed with HE?
So I was 54 and a half when I got sick, and yeah, so.
That's so young, right? I mean.
Yeah. And I mean, I had a career and, a lot of things going on in life, and suddenly, bam.
And you were an attorney, correct?
Yes, I was. I was indeed. And I was at work one day at my desk in the office, and suddenly I had what those of us in the HE community call stroke-like episodes. So I had a stroke-like episode, never had anything quite like that before. And so they took me to the hospital, and initially thought it was a stroke, but that was the last day I ever worked.
Amazing. I mean, that's just so sad. I'm sure you worked hard to become an attorney. That's not an easy thing to become. So had to be kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was. I loved my career. I still love the law. But you know what? Sometimes things happen in life, and we have to change direction. We don't get a choice when this is one of those cases.
Yeah, and you have done other things to make you feel good about yourself. I know that with creating HESA and helping people out through that door, as we say. So
yeah, indeed. And of course, as you remember, when we first met, there was no HESA. We met through a global encephalitis online community. And that was such a lifeline when I met you, because I just never, it astonished me that what I then referred to as an exceedingly rare condition, how did I somehow come across somebody else with the same condition on this website? But I did.
Nick, I have to tell the story. I remember distinctly when I met you. I was in Green Bay in a hotel room waiting for more tests. They were doing something, or I was getting the steroid infusions maybe at that time. And I was online trying to find somebody, a group with one person in it, even just one person that I could talk to about HE. And I was on encephalitis group, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's somebody on here that actually was diagnosed with it. So you became my lifeline, because it was like nobody else. I couldn't find no one.
Yeah. Boy, what a wonderful coincidence that was. I don't really believe in coincidences per se. So
It sure was.
I think we were meant to be brought together so we could do some good work.
I believe that with all my heart. You know I do. We've talked about that many times. Um, you know, what kind of symptoms did you get besides the stroke-like symptoms when you first got sick?
Well, in some ways, my story is a little different than many people in that I had, well, I'll back up. It was February 2011 when I had that episode at work, but for about 6 weeks before that, I had begun to have some odd issues with concentration. And I even, in my office, all of us, I was part of a national law firm, and we all kept our doors open during the day unless we were meeting with someone or whatever. But I started keeping my door closed, and I put a notice on the door saying, doors just closed for distraction purposes. Feel free to come in. So I started having problems with controlling distractions and being able to continue to think. And then really from the day I had that stroke-like episode, I had really profound speech problems. That was one of my biggest issues from the beginning. I just could not put together a sentence. I mean, my sentences were scrambled, and sometimes my speech was just garbled. I would think I was going to say a particular sentence, but all that would come out would be these sounds, syllables, random. Anyway, so my speech was a big problem from the day that I had that first episode. And then severe memory problems, which I still have transient amnesia. So some days I do not form any memories. So, and sometimes I just lose, a few minutes or an hour, but sometimes I lose long periods of time, which is still a problem for me. So yeah, memory, balance, my balance got terrible. My judgment got so bad. I did things that didn't make any sense, really. I mean, I sometimes tell the story about, we had a fireplace in the house we were living in at that time. And one day I wanted to go out and split some wood for the fireplace. So I went in the garage and proceeded to do this barefoot in the dead of winter on a concrete floor, which, that kind of says it all right there. So yeah, my judgment, I just didn't have I didn't have good sense, if you could, maybe that's a way to put it. So I guess, yeah, the memory, and myoclonus. I've had a lot of trouble with myoclonus, and I was having a lot of myoclonus then. And in fact, that caused so much trouble with my sleep that I never could get good rest while that was going on. So that was another issue. And then I went from sleeping, 20 hours a day to being unable to sleep at all, back and forth. So sleep issues, I guess those were my main symptoms.
Did you have headaches, Nick?
Oh, yes. Sorry. How could I forget? How could I forget the headaches? Yes. Yes, I did. I sure did. And I can remember feeling things like, and I've talked to other HE patients who've experienced the same thing. I would feel like someone had been brushing my hair with a wire brush. I mean, like a wire brush like you'd use in a garage to clean metal parts. I mean, my scalp would hurt so badly. Just odd pains and odd trouble with moving certain limbs at times. This is back in the beginning, especially. It was I had a lot of movement trouble.
Yeah, I can relate to all of the above. And do you still get that feeling on your head once in a while? I know I do.
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I had it the other night and I was saying to my husband, oh, I hate this. It feels like when I first got sick. Now it's gotten better. I had about 2 days, like within the last week where it was like that. And then I don't even want to brush my hair because it just hurts to even brush my hair. It hurts to touch my head.
I remember thinking sometimes it felt like somebody had a rubber band in my hair, a ponytail so tight that my scalp felt like it was being stretched. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but that's how it felt.
Yeah. Yes. That's a good description.
It was awful, I have to tell you. So you had sort of the typical, I hate to say it, HE symptoms in the beginning, that's for sure.
Right.
How long did it take for you to be diagnosed, Nick?
Well, let's see. From the day I was first seen for these symptoms until the day I had a tentative diagnosis was about 4 months.
That's long enough.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes,
not,
more than enough.
yeah. I mean, you can get some permanent brain damage done after that long, right? I mean,
well, yeah, I mean, and one of my neurologists does think that I had some damage to the brain, which could explain my ongoing problems with transient amnesia.
that's just sad. I mean, hopefully now they can come to a conclusion much quicker than that. Trying to diagnose people since there's so much more information out there. But
Right.
I know there's people still have issues with that, and it's sad because they shouldn't, you know.
Yeah. And now, of course, at least there are some recommended protocols, which didn't exist back then, for how to approach someone with this. Because even once I had the diagnosis, then by the time I was diagnosed, I was down at a university hospital and I had a team of doctors and they were very split on what should be done and, how to proceed with treatment. So, and I think now that would be much less of a problem, but that was 11 years ago. So
Yeah, there definitely is a protocol now that they follow. So thank God, right? I mean,
yeah.
a lot less people getting any permanent damage done. Did you find yourself worsening during this period that you were waiting for this diagnosis and some kind of a treatment?
Yeah, actually, I was worsening and I was having more and more seizures and yeah. And my mental state got pretty bad. So between the disruption of the mental state that often goes along with HE and the stress of not knowing, what's wrong with me. Am I dying, or what's going on? So I think the stress, as we know, stress makes all autoimmune conditions worse. So the stress during that time of not knowing and having some doctors just be so ignorant and having to deal with them and being, I couldn't even, in the beginning, I couldn't put a sentence together. So it was pretty hard for me to even go through an exam and talking to them because it was really hard to talk. So I would write things out before I would go in so that I wouldn't be just like a stammering, I don't know, child or something.
I know exactly, because when you have some kind of a brain disease, how do you go into a neurologist? They're all in a hurry. And you're like I am, I'm assuming it takes us time to form the questions in our head to speak, and you're being rushed and you don't remember half of what you wanted to ask or to tell them what's happening. You leave and you could just scream or kick yourself because you didn't get half of it out.
Yeah, right. And sometimes, for me, well, and this is still the case, if I have a list of things that I want to make sure I say or ask about or inform the physician about, I've got to write them down because my memory is so unreliable now. And, a lot of people will say, oh, well, you're in your 60s. Yeah, your memory slips a little. Yeah, well, this was in my 50s. And no, that was not it. Because I went from being a high functioning attorney one day to I can't remember anything the next. So.
That's not the same. I agree with you 100%. I always get that comment too. I can't remember things either. Well, okay, well, there's just a little bit of difference.
Yeah, well, and I know a lot of times it's people wanting to sympathize, but it's hard when you're living with profound impairment of memory. So,
and you have for 10 years, so it's like an ongoing process. Did you have any idea what they were going to diagnose you with? Did you have any clue at all? Were you shocked when they came out with that HE diagnosis?
Well, what's funny is I was, as I mentioned, my thinking was very, very confused at that time. And although my job had entailed research, lots of research all the time, I was a really good researcher, but I was not competent to do any kind of even basic research at that time. My daughter, however, works in the medical field. She's not a doctor, she's not a nurse, but she's a medical professional. And she did some digging around online, and she was actually the first person to think, I wonder if it's this, and so she's the one that actually brought that up onto the radar for our family anyway. So in some ways, no, I wasn't surprised. Because it confirmed what she had suspected.
Oh, that's amazing that you had somebody to do that for you and have some kind of an idea or something to push the doctors maybe to look at, right? I mean,
well, she didn't do that because, interestingly enough, well, actually, I'll tell you how I ended up getting off the treadmill of no progress and onto the path toward a diagnosis and recovery. Such as it has been. And I was initially, I got hospitalized a couple of times in the town where I was living at the time, which is not a large town, but a decent sized town. And either the second or the third time, I guess it may have been the third hospitalization, they were going to just release me and send me home in spite of the fact that I was incredibly impaired, because the neurologist had given up. He'd thrown up his hands and said, well, I don't know. I can't figure out what this is. Well, he didn't say that. What he said was, none of the tests show anything. So, you just need to find a good psychiatrist. Oh. And my daughter she kind of blew a gasket on that and said, there is no way you're sending my mom home. This is not going to happen. We need a second opinion here. And so the hospital did bring another neurologist in. He looked at me, talked to me for 15 minutes, ordered a blood test for antibodies for thyroid. And, this is 15 minutes after he met me. Now, the other guy's been treating me for months, right? But 15 minutes and he says, let's do this. Comes back, with the high antibodies, and he had me transferred down to a university hospital. So I don't remember how I got off on this tangent, but that's how I ended up. And that's where I was diagnosed. That's where they had the expertise and the knowledge and the inquisitiveness to follow up and figure out, no, okay, so these antibodies are high. Is there anything else going on, et cetera? And that was.
Actually, I had somewhat of the same experience. I had a really great neurologist, but she told me she wanted to send me for a second opinion and Mayo, but my insurance wouldn't be covered. So I ended up in Chicago at the University Hospital there. And the neurologist I was talking to, they did a TPO, they did the antibody test, and it came back very high. And he said to me, I think it has something to do with this. I came back to my neurologist and brought those results, and she did her own tests, and immediately she knew what I had. But that was after 9 months.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but I felt fortunate.
Well, when you finally get that diagnosis, it is such a relief to know what you're dealing with, even though when you and I were diagnosed, and it's funny because we were both diagnosed very close to the same time. Back then you got the diagnosis, and then what I kept saying, what I could find online was 600 people in the world have only ever had this. And I thought, oh my goodness.
I know.
Strike the lottery on rare diseases.
Yeah, I think we have broken the lottery on autoimmune diseases itself. Between you and I. Oh boy. Nick, how many doctors do you think you went through to get this diagnosis? Any idea?
Well, let's see. I had my original neurologist, and then I had the second opinion guy, and then I had a team of, I think it was maybe around 6 people, 6 physicians. I think it was 6 when I was at the university hospital, and that's where I was diagnosed. So, and I did also take the trip to Mayo at one point, but that was a very unfortunate experience since I didn't see the only 2 guys up there that knew about this stuff at the time. I saw someone who was elderly and close to retirement, actually probably maybe needed to be retired before he saw me, but anyway, that was not a helpful experience for me.
I remember that experience for you, and it was traumatic.
It was very traumatic because I had already been treated with high dose steroids, which had brought me back to, a not my prior self, but close. I mean, while I was on the IV steroids, I was able to talk and walk and do all kinds of amazing things.
You were functional again.
I know, yeah, I was like a grown-up again.
Well, I know that, first of all, I'm going to ask you, I'm not going to answer the question for you. What did he diagnose you with, that doctor?
The one at Mayo?
Yeah.
Oh, he said this is, I'm quite sure this is functional psychiatric. And, we've got some very good psychiatric programs, and, that's what you need. Which was very frustrating for me. And my family doctor, who is a super smart guy, he was kind of beside himself. And when he saw me after my visit to Mayo, he just shook his head and said, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that you went up there.
And how many times have you heard this same story, Nick?
Oh, there's endless, pretty much. I think all of us who, I mean, it may be changing now. I suspect it may be changing now, but back then, no one, there was a lot of question of whether HE even existed, whether autoimmune encephalitis existed, or whether this was just an imaginary disease. Yeah.
That's where the frustration really comes in, because you're diagnosed with something and you have other doctors questioning whether it's even legit. So it's pretty hard to even get serious, thinking about it, because you're in the back of your head, you're like, well, am I making it up? Or am I really sick?
Yeah, and it's just the frustration that causes, certainly that it caused me, of having no information. Once I had gone through the IV steroids and they had seen the dramatic improvement, and it was, they were pretty smart at that university hospital. They did a good job of doing establishing basically through neuropsych type testing, what I was like when I got there, and then what I was like after the IV steroids. And it was just an astonishing difference. Oh, the other thing that happened to me that the IV steroids took away was I had become hyper reflexive. And I know that's another thing that happens to a lot of us with AE. I mean, just a noise or a noise from another room could make me just jump up, like my body would just fly up. Or heaven forbid when they would do the reflex tests, because they would check my reflexes and I'd go into a series of convulsions. And once again, I don't remember how I got off on that tangent.
It's okay. That's what we're all about here.
Yeah, right.
You're
Right.
giving information. That's what counts. So it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's just such a weird disease in itself, and trying to get somebody to give you a correct diagnosis, and then you have somebody giving you a different diagnosis, then you go back and you get the same diagnosis. It's like, okay, what's going on here?
Right. And I do credit the people at University Hospital for having arrested the progression, because I was in a really bad way when I got transported there. I was very sick and very impaired, and they brought me around. And even though I did have other bad experiences with some specialists afterwards, I did finally wind up finding a wonderful neurologist who I have profound respect for, and still have my same family doctor who's been with me. He knew me before HE struck, so he had a firsthand view of what I was like before and after.
And that's important, because when you go to a new doctor, they don't know your history, or how what, I don't even know what the word is, how that goes. How intelligent you were, or how high functioning you were, and then you go to a new doctor, they don't know, but your old doctor does. So he's got a really good idea how sick you really are.
Yeah, right.
I
That's been invaluable. That's been invaluable, having a family doctor really that I could rely on, because as you know, with insurance, there can be ongoing paperwork that has to be done. And thankfully, he does my paperwork year after year. And, he knows what to write down, which if I was to have to go to another doctor, well, I'm no longer going to be in that situation, because my disability insurance is finally coming to an end. But it's just trying to deal with a new doctor it's terrifying. And what an awful thing to fear going to the doctor. But I learned to fear going to the doctor through this whole process, because I found out, that it can be just a horrible experience if you can't properly express yourself. And, the people are, I don't know, seeing doctors who know less about the condition than I do is always disturbing. So.
And I find myself having to teach or educate them sometimes about the disease because, and there's that fine line you're crossing over when you're trying to tell somebody that's more educated than you information about your disease and how it needs to be treated. You know, there's that step there. You don't want to overstep into somebody else's space, but if you know what I mean.
I sure do. I sure do. And you know what? It would be like for me as an attorney to have someone come in and say, well, I read somewhere that thus and such. And, you know, as an attorney, that's can be very annoying to hear. And I'm sure it is for doctors too. But the problem is, of course, with medicine, sometimes there are new things going on. And if it's a physician that's not staying up on the new developments, particularly with like this neuroimmunology, for example, which is a brand new field since we got sick.
Yeah,
and that
it
field
is.
didn't even exist when we got sick, you and I.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and the neuropsychs that are being dual trained, I think is so important to this disease, because it takes both.
yeah.
You know.
Right.
Anyway, so Nick, how did this affect your family, do you think, you being sick?
Well, I think one thing that happened, of course, was that there's a role reversal that happens. You know, I was the mom of the family, and my kids were, the youngest was in college when I got sick, but the other two were already grown and out of college. And so there's that role reversal. My oldest son was actually living with us at the time I got sick. And he's the one who ended up really watching me when my husband went off to work to try and make sure I didn't hurt myself or burn the house down accidentally, just through my, again, poor judgment. So, you know, being cared for by your children is kind of weird. I mean, it's good. It's wonderful. I love that my family love me and they want to take care of me, but it was really hard. So there was that, which was very negative from my perspective. You know, it's hard for me to like completely change my role. And of course, it impacts the marriage a bit because, you know, my husband, who had been an equal partner with me, was now my caregiver. And that's also weird. I mean, wonderful. I'm happy he did it and continues to do it. But, you know, I have become very dependent, and that was never me. I was always a really independent person. And, but I have kind of, I mean, I don't drive anymore because I don't want to have one of my stroke-like seizures and drive off the road or something. So I stopped driving, made that decision myself. So I you know, I'm dependent. I need a ride either from my husband or one of my kids if I want to go somewhere. So I guess those are kind of the changes in the roles within the family are I guess the big thing.
I remember the one time in our groups, we did a survey. Nick, I don't know if you remember this, but we asked how many people diagnosed with HE were A personalities. Do you remember that? And almost
I do remember the survey. I don't remember what the number was, but I remember there were a lot of us.
Most of us were A personalities. And I think that has a lot to do with it. You know, that stress of wanting to be perfect or being super high achievers, you know, I swear it has something to do with the autoimmune diseases, because that was just not coincidental, you know? that we
Yeah,
all,
I've read that chronic stress is a great predictor for autoimmune diseases. So,
yeah, well, that kind of proved it all when we were doing that. Have you tried any type of treatments besides the steroid treatments, Nick?
the only thing that I have done for my HE is are the steroids. I've got other medications that I take to treat symptoms, but those are to address specific symptoms, not to address the condition itself.
Well, I know that through the years you have become so much better, right? I mean, you've seen such an
Yeah.
improvement.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, 10 years, I mean, but you know, it does come around.
Yeah, it's amazing. It used to be the conventional wisdom always was that with a brain injury, after a brain injury, you're going to get whatever recovery you're going to get within the first 6 months. Then it was 2 years, then it was 5 years. And now I think it's off the table. I think they've come to acknowledge that there's a whole lot more. Well, first of all, there's neuroplasticity. So we know that the brain will reorganize itself to deal with damaged areas. And in some cases, you can get back, quite a bit of function that way. And then there's also just the healing process, and it can go on a very, very, very long time.
And the emotional part of it, healing. I mean, because being diagnosed with a chronic rare disease can be depressing and cause a lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. We didn't talk about this earlier when we were talking about the initial times, but those first, maybe I guess the first 6 months or a year, I became very depressed. I became very anxious. I went through a period of time where I was feeling suicidal because I lost hope for a while that I was ever going to get any better, and feeling like I couldn't talk, couldn't tell people what I was experiencing. And I've always been kind of a communicator. It's been a sort of a core part of me, is talking with people, exchanging ideas, and losing the ability to do that. I just felt like, what's the point of living? I felt like I had lost who I was. I lost the inner sense of who I was. I lost my inner voice. And that was devastating. I mean, that was really, really devastating. So, I mean, among the many impacts that this disease has had, I think probably the worst has been what it did to me emotionally during that time, because I was just in the darkest place of my entire life.
It's so sad. I I don't know if you experienced this part talking about that, but I remember looking into the mirror thinking I didn't recognize myself anymore. And I don't know if it was I hadn't changed physically at that point. Well, maybe from the prednisone, but I mean, I remember looking in there and going, I don't know me anymore. I don't know who that person is. And that might have been part of that inner, like you're talking about, where you just don't know anymore who you are, physically
Yeah.
or mentally. Who are you?
I have very few memories of when I was at my sickest. Most of that is just lost to me. The only things I know about what happened then are notes I took that I can read now, which are kind of entertaining because, well, anyway. But I can remember being in the hospital, and the university hospital, and I can remember thinking, I feel like I'm trapped in a Kafka story. So, there was this author, Franz Kafka, and he wrote some stories that involve people being in otherworldly situations, like the guy that turns into a cockroach. He wakes up one day and he's a cockroach. So, but it was like I was in some sort of weird, horrible dream that would not end. Just went on and on.
Yeah, I get it. I don't know if you experienced this, but one of my worst things that I remember experiencing was I had no empathy. I had no feelings about anything. I know I should be happy about something and I couldn't feel it in my heart or my soul, or I knew I should be sad and I couldn't feel it. That feeling that you get, or extreme happiness, I couldn't get that. I would act the part, but I didn't feel the part. I don't know if you experienced that, Nick, also.
Yeah, and I also, not only did I experience that real severe blunting of emotions,
Yes.
but I also experienced from time to time, just I would randomly burst out laughing or randomly burst out crying, and no trigger whatsoever. I mean, I could just be sitting on the couch looking out the window at the birds at the bird feeder, and for zero reason, just begin laughing or crying. But yet I didn't actually have those emotional states of happiness or sadness or even anger. Not the way I do when I'm in my right mind. I just felt, yeah, the emotional life was very, very mixed up. And I was just in this fugue state where it was like, I couldn't find my way back to who I was. I couldn't, I mean, you talk about looking in the mirror and not recognizing yourself. I can remember like thinking, did I just dream that person that I was before? Did I dream the whole thing where I was a lawyer and, or is this a dream? Or I had actually, and during that time, during the early days, I had a lot of trouble sorting out the difference between dreams and reality. I would have a dream and think it happened. And then I'd get up the next day and I'd be walking around thinking that whatever it was that I dreamed had actually occurred. It was just,
So
such a
strange.
horrible time.
It's
So much confusion. Just the mental confusion was just horrendous.
and how do you explain that to someone?
You can't.
You can't.
No. I mean, because in a way, it's like as though you are on, like you're, like the non-clarity of being very drunk, maybe, I mean, just like where you can't put one thought together with another thought. I mean, that's, being really drunk is the only experience I have in life that in any way comes close to mimicking that, that feeling that, oh my gosh, I can't walk a straight line. I can't, I can't speak. I can't anything.
I used to use that as a description to my doctors as far as my balance goes. I would say I walk like a drunken sailor because
yeah,
I couldn't go down the steps without bouncing off the walls. Like I was bouncing off the woodworks. I still can't walk a straight line. I mean, my balance is awful, but yeah, it's that feeling that you just, and when I'm going through a flare up, or relapse, I don't know about you if you get this way too, but my brain is like a merry-go-round. I mean, there's never a complete thought, right? You
Yeah.
go from one thing you're thinking of, you don't complete that thought, but you're into the next thought, and then you're into the next thought, and it just keeps repeating over and over and over. And that's so frustrating. Like you said, with as far as concentrating, that's probably part of it. You can't concentrate when you can't complete a thought.
Yeah, and even things you know so well, like I can remember, and this still happens to me if I get a flare, something like the Lord's Prayer, which I
Yes.
have said daily since I was a little kid. I couldn't remember how it went. I'd get a few of the words, and then I'd be suddenly saying the 23rd Psalm, and then maybe some words from a hymn, and just like I could not keep anything together.
Yeah, just as you talk about that, just praying for me, I'll get into I've prayed my whole life, right? And at night especially, and you start saying your prayers, and somewhere along the line you're somewhere else. It's not, I think, well, God understands my intention here, but it's frustrating because you can't stay focused.
Yeah. Yeah, the lack of focus, the loss of focus. And for many years after I got sick, I could not read really anything. I couldn't read for what's the word I want? I would read, but I couldn't stay focused very well. And gosh, I remember when we were doing the books, what a challenge it was to try and keep myself focused so I could do the proofreading and the editing and all that stuff, and the oh my goodness, doing our it's it's amazing to me that we did manage to do that, even though we were all so sick. And
I say that all the time. How did all of us with HE do that? How did we do it?
it's astonishing, really.
It is.
Just goes to show what people who are highly motivated can do despite their disabilities, right?
Yeah, whether you're sick or not and you have no brain left, but we ended up doing it. And, we did some great accomplishments. There's no doubt about it. And both of us being sick. I remember during that time, I couldn't edit anything. I still have a problem with that. There's just something about going back and rereading something. I can't. I don't know why. I have no idea. Must be the part of my brain that's affected the worst, but I still can't.
Well, I had for many years after I got sick, I had to use like an electronic device to limit. So I only had about 4 lines of text or 5 lines of text visible on the page at a time, because my eyes wouldn't track left to right and then go down one line, left to right, down one line. I couldn't do that. So I had to resort to using a device and, magnifying the text so that I only saw small parts of it at a time. And yeah, I know that's how I got through that, is by using devices like that. What do you say? Strategies like that. Because otherwise I couldn't do it. Now, amazingly, in the last maybe 2 years, I can actually pick up a book. I can hold a physical book and read it without having to, take cardboard and cover up part of the page and that kind of thing, that's how I got into it. Was I decided, well, I'm going to see if I can, maybe if I block out part of the page, I'll be able to follow it and read, which is, that's how I got to where I am now. So it's like, you know what, month by month, year by year, now after a decade, I'm doing things I didn't think I'd ever be able to do. So,
and what a joy it is to read again, right?
yes, it's incredible.
It's and I'm going to back myself up for a minute, but that's one of the symptoms everybody talks about when they first get diagnosed that they can't read,
Mhm.
that their
Yeah.
inability to read anything because, or they have to take things in little like you're talking about, little paragraphs at a time and
Right.
and read it. And with our memories, by the time you get done with that paragraph, you don't remember when you go on to the next one what you just read.
Yes, I have a memory of when I was at the hospital, at the university hospital. I remember the one neurologist came into my room with a round of, med students. And I had my Bible open because I was reading in the Bible. And the Bible was actually something that I could more easily read because it had first of all, it had that Bible anyway, had columns down, divided into 2 columns. So my eyes didn't have to move so far left and right. Plus, divided into verses, the way a Bible is, my eyes could pick out more easily and read. So he said, well, read me something from there. So I read, I don't know, a couple of verses just randomly. And then when I was done, he said, okay, so tell me about what you read there. What does it mean to you? And I said, I have no idea what I read. Because as fast as the words could come out of my mouth, but I had zero comprehension.
I get it. I mean, when I was first diagnosed too, I remember reading backwards or taking a magazine and starting at the back of the magazine going forward.
Yes. You know what? That's something that I remember discovering as a common thing among a bunch of us on the AT page, is that we started reading magazines backwards to the front. Why? I don't know. But
I don't know. Was your
another oddity?
Yeah. Was your left temporal frontal lobe affected, or was it your right?
My left side of my brain was like silent when they did the SPECT. There was just like nothing happening.
It's my left too. That's why it makes me wonder, because maybe that has something to do with it, right? I mean, because maybe that's, I don't know, I can't explain it, but because so many of us, it's the left side, just a few are the right that are affected. But I mean, for us to be reading that magazine left to the back to the front, because I remember it so distinctively, I'm like, why am I doing this? It's like the only way I could read a magazine.
You know what? I don't know about the only way I could do it. I just know that I kept doing it. Like I would pick up a magazine and I would start going from the back to the front. And someone pointed out to me, I think it was my son, maybe, gee, Mom, do you realize you're starting at the back, going to the front? And I think I just looked at him like, so?
The pictures look the same.
Well, yeah, that may have been it. I was basically looking at the pictures mostly anyway. Reading was kind of out of it.
But there was a bunch of us that did the same thing with the brain damage that we had. So
yeah, and a number of oddities that we found through that, particularly through the online community, just sort of comparing notes and finding these just peculiar things that just are so weird. Oh, well.
I haven't thought of that for a long time, but yeah, that was one of them. I just remember that so well, that because I remember thinking, oh my God, I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, we've been fortunate to have each other, that's for sure. Have you had any permanent damage done, do you think, Nick?
Well, my neurologist seems to think I have. She's, but nothing that shows on an MRI, or not the last time I had one done. So, and yet there are certain permanent impairments. A lot of function has come back. I mean, you can hear I'm talking like a normal person.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I haven't talked to you for a while, but I am Impressed.
Well, it's really nice to be able to, carry on a conversation. Of course, I'm having a very good day today, and I took a nap while you were
Oh,
doing your prior interview. So you're catching me wide awake, well rested. I do find that one of the things that's most important for me is don't allow myself to get overtired, because if I get overtired, it could take me quite a while to come back from that. So I do lie down every day in the middle of the day. I just make it a point to never, ever allow myself to get overtired, because that's just a kiss of death.
How many hours of sleep do you need a day, Nick? Do you think, to feel decent?
Nowadays, I usually sleep around 2 hours in the midday, and then about 7 or 8 hours at night. So probably total, I sleep about 10 hours a day, which is a lot more than I used to sleep.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think before I got sick, I probably didn't sleep 5-6 hours a night. I mean, my brain never stopped. So, I mean, yeah.
Yes. I did not sleep like that back before I got sick.
Do you ever have days now where you feel like you hit a brick wall and you have to just go to bed? It doesn't matter
Yes.
what time it is?
Yep. I absolutely do. And I try to respect that. And I try not to, one of the things about having this illness makes it very hard to make plans to do anything, because I never know, is it going to be a good day or a bad day?
Oh
is it
my
going to be a
gosh.
day where I have some energy, or is it going to be at one of those days where I can barely get out of bed? But most days I'm pretty good, but then you never know when the curveball will come across the plate. So I went out on a limb and bought concert tickets. So we're actually going to a concert
Oh, how
later this
fun.
month, which should be interesting. And knock on wood, it'll be a good day, and I'll have a long nap in the midday so that I can go to this concert without it putting me back
Oh,
for.
that's so exciting. I'm happy for you. I'm very
Thanks.
happy for you.
Thanks.
That's another thing with people with this chronic illness is that they can't make plans. You can't.
Right.
You don't know from day to day how you're going to feel. You can't work a job. At least I know that I couldn't work a job outside the house, even if it was for 2 hours a day, because I don't know how I'm going to be from 1 minute to the next. I can change. I can feel fine right now, and then 5 minutes from now, not.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that extreme unpredictability does make life hard. We can get in the car and drive over to Menards to look at something for the house. And I'm fine when we leave the house, but 10 minutes later when we get there, I'm too shaky to get out of the car. So, and worse for me really is just, we've got a son that lives overseas, and we did travel to see him in 2018, but the trip took a lot out of me, and I was sick for a substantial part of the trip. And of course, we haven't been back since because of the pandemic. I want to go. I want to see him again, but any kind of a international travel for me is it's a roll of the dice. I got to buy travel insurance, because what if I'm too sick when the time comes? And then I always fear what will happen if I get sick while I'm over there. But if I have a relapse while I'm there, but that is in many ways, that is the worst thing about this disease. And I suppose any chronic disease that's disabling, that's a relapsing, remitting disease. I often tell people when I'm trying to explain my situation, I often tell them it's similar to MS, because a lot of people have had some exposure to MS and they know that, oh, well, someone with MS one day they're fine, the next day not at all. And of course, that's how it is with this disease too.
And the balance issues with
Yes.
MS and HE. I mean,
Right.
a lot of times I can feel okay sitting here. I'm fine. I get up to walk and there's no balance. And that's scary. It's scary to go
Yep.
anywhere. I mean, because you're not sure, how it's going to be.
Right. Yes. Yes. Indeed.
Nick, if you were going to, in your own words, give some words of wisdom to people that might be trying to get a diagnosis or have gotten a diagnosis and are new to this whole scene, what would you tell them?
Let's see, I guess I would say a couple of things. First of all, do your best to never give up hope, because some of us do really well. Some of us get pretty much back to the way they were before they got sick. I know a woman who was an engineer. She got HE. She was unable to work for several years, but she eventually went back to work. She eventually had another child.
Yes, I know who you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are people that do really well, and some of us do really well most of the time and only have trouble once in a while. Some of us have kind of permanent losses. I'm in that camp. But even if you end up having some permanent losses, you can still make a lot of progress long past the time you might expect. Some of my greatest progress has been in the last couple of years, and I was diagnosed now 11 years ago. So just don't ever give up hope. There's so many changes out there. There's research ongoing. We've got neuroimmunology as a specialty now. So, and many people interested in this group of diseases, the autoimmune encephalitis group. And so I think that is the main thing I would say, is just don't lose hope. And also the other thing is, for me, I had to change my focus when it became apparent I was not going to practice law again. And I was able then to turn my attention to other things, different endeavors. I have a granddaughter who is now 9.5. So she came along, not too long after I got sick. And I have been able to devote so much time and attention to her, which I never would have been able to do if I was still working. So, remember that life can change and new things can come along. And if you remain open to them, and if you remain open to focusing your attention in new areas, that can be a very helpful thing. Try new things, try things you haven't tried before. I've started painting pictures.
Oh, good for
And
you.
I've done, I think, maybe 5 now. And it's not something I did before, not since high school. And it's fun and I really enjoy it. So, you can find new things, but you got to give yourself permission to do it and try your best not to wallow in the sadness of what you've lost. And of course, it's a grief like any other. So you also have to be patient with the grief process, because just like losing a person, you lose kind of a part of yourself with this disease.
You do.
And you got to give yourself time to grieve, and you got to understand that the grief process is not linear. It doesn't go kind of this way, this step, then this step, then this step, then this step. It's back and forth and up and down and in and out. And it's this thing is bothering you, then that thing's bothering you. But, it gets better.
It does. And you and I have talked about this too, that I think people need a sense of a purpose too, a reason to get up in the morning and a reason to keep trying to get better. You and I both, starting HESA together was a great purpose for me. I know it kept me going and it kept me focused on something different besides myself. And I think that we both should be very happy what we have done with the nonprofit, and that I feel we've helped a lot of people, especially with the books. And yeah, that was my purpose and that was my focus. And it's been healing for me.
Yeah, really. The finding a purpose is so important. And, your purpose may be nothing, you may need to start small if you're really limited. Maybe your purpose is you're going to feed the birds in your yard. And that's going to be your purpose, or you're going to find one thing you can do that makes you feel better, and do that thing,
like I always say, even if you knit and or crochet, or if you crochet blankets for the hospital, or you crochet hats for the cancer ward, make you feel good about yourself again.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I think that's important.
Yes, I think so too. I think that that idea of finding purpose, I think starting the organization with you and doing the books, but it's probably what pulled me out of my terrible downward spiral emotionally after I was sick, when I was feeling so hopeless. And then I met you, and I started thinking, well, wait a minute, you know what? Maybe I can figure out how to make some lemonade with these lemons.
Exactly. I remember you saying, when one door closes, another one opens.
Yeah.
I remember you using that phrase, and I think we both used that door for a long time.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I so enjoy this, stopping by the Facebook page, seeing what people in the community are saying, or pages, I guess, because we got more than one, but seeing what people are posting and what people are thinking about. And sometimes I think it's enough just to go online and make a positive response to somebody makes a post and they say, I'm going through this really hard thing today. Well, you can make a positive post back and say, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that. Hang in there. I'll be thinking of you. Just, giving encouragement to other people is such a good way to not get bogged down in the sadness of what you've lost.
Well, I think you and I both remember how we felt. And when we found a group that we could talk to other people, this is before we did our own thing, it was so important. I mean, that was such a lifeline, right? To talk to these people and find out that they felt the same. Otherwise you start to think that you're the only one experiencing these things, so it's a lifeline.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Well, Nick, I just want to say thank you so much for sitting down this afternoon and talking to me, and your journey to your diagnosis and your life for the last 11 years. It's going to encourage many others. I know that. And I really appreciate it. And I love you.
Oh, I love you too. And thank you so much for doing this. I'm so glad that you're taking the effort, taking the time and the energy, and I know Maddie is a big part of this too, and just getting this out there for people, because indeed, knowing you're not alone can make such a difference, and we aren't alone.
Don't we wish we would have had this when we were diagnosed?
Well, and that's why we did it, right? Because we didn't want anyone else to have to go through this long, lonely road all alone. So
exactly. Well, thanks, Nick. And I will talk to you later.
sounds good. Bye-bye now.